Right on.
All right, hello everyone. This is Ladek. I am from OpenLMS, and as promised, we are broadcasting live from Educause on day one.
Yes.
It's pretty exciting.
Day one.
Special day one, and I am here with. I'm going to just actually Shazam with Bart, and I'm going to give you it's Pursel.
Pursel, you got it.
Of Unizin.
Right.
And we're here for our first conversation today. Tell me, before we dive into our conversation, what's your first impression of Educause 2022, just coming out of the gate? Because I know that we were here last year, and I'm not trying to be disparaging, but it was still kind of COVID, and it just felt really empty. It was a totally different feel this year.
That's a good question. This is my first Educause since pre-pandemic, so it feels almost as big as before the pandemic. I was here. Boy, they had an Educause here maybe 7 or 8 years ago that felt a little bit bigger, but not by much. So it feels good to have so many people back in action. Still not having exposure. Should I hear it through here?
Here's the thing. Yeah,
if
no.
Not, I might just take off the headset.
Here's the thing: is I know what's happening. I made a very novice mistake. Now, awesome novice mistake. Very interesting indeed. So it's actually showing that we are. You know what? I know. Okay. All right.
I can do it without the headphones if it's easier just to ditch the headphones.
Yeah, let's try. But also, I want to see. Hello. All right. Excellent. Cool. So we're just gonna have our. Oh, here we go. Now it's coming out there. Excellent. And I have no idea why. So there. And so now what we should hear is Jam. No.
Hear anything? No, I don't hear anything on that one, but that's okay.
I can hear you.
Yeah, we can live without that.
Awesome.
As long as your audio comes through workable for you, that's what's important, right?
Exactly. So anyway, so you were here. The conference is looking good this year. It's absolutely fantastic. Great. So let's talk about your company.
Okay.
Let's talk about data.
Sure.
Let's talk about something that's actually interesting to people who are listening.
Sure.
I wanted to talk about the presentation that Kathy's going to be at, and several other panel members are going to be talking about data for learner success.
Yep.
So why don't we start there? Take me through what does that mean in the presentation that you're going to be having. I saw everything from learning pathways to analytics to bringing it back to the classroom and actually empowering professors and educators. So you give me the overview of what that presentation is going to look like.
Sure, and I'll try not to make it sound like a pitch. Although by the time people hear this, the presentation is probably going to be over, right? So it's not going to matter. Kathy O'Brien's our CEO at Unizin, and she's giving a talk today at 1:00 with some of our members on how they've taken what we call the Unizin Data Platform. I might slip into acronyms. The UDP is what we call that.
Okay.
So that's the Unizin Data Platform, and how members have taken different data from that platform and put them in the hands of, in some case, students, in some case, teachers, in some case, advisors, to try and move up as early in a semester as possible, the ability to reach out to someone that might be struggling in different ways for different reasons, right? So it's a new data stream people haven't had access to before. I hate that phrase, data-driven in education. Data-informed, I prefer much better.
All right.
So, the people that receive this data, the data can't tell you that somebody had a bad breakup. The data can't tell you a lot of things, but it's just another data stream that, when given to a professional with other data streams and other experiences and relationship with the student, it can help uncover some more of those clues, right? They help inform when they reach out. So the data platform itself, just to give you a sense of what that is, it's really really designed to bring together some information from the student information system. So usually things about students, things about courses, things about academic terms and degrees and programs, learning management system data, and then learning tool data.
Okay.
So we have different sort of ingest that sort of bring that together and harmonize it with what we call the Unizin Common Data Model. It's really based off the Common Educational Data Standard that comes out of the federal government here in this country. So it puts the data in that shape, puts it in the data platform, so all of our members are looking at the same data, and then they can build applications on top of that. They can do faculty research, they can do different cross-institutional research. Some opt to do that. There's sort of data governance and anonymization and privacy things all wrapped up that's complicated in that, but some choose to get together to do cross-institutional research. And the UDP is kind of the catalyst or the spark, the product that allows that to happen more quickly than it would otherwise, because we try and unify that data so other people don't have to. It makes it easier to just start with unified data from there. Instead of having to go through all that, find the data, aggregate it, clean it, transform it, and then work with it, we try and take care of all those steps and just get people to where they can work with it much more quickly.
So the first question out of my head is, since we're talking about Unizin, is it transferable? Like, so you talked about it goes through your platform, you shape it, it becomes available to reporting other. I'm sure you can connect APIs and those kinds of things to it. So, but this doesn't make data. It's the old Microsoft model. Like, does it trap it somewhere? Does it put it in a silo? So, or is it open? Open to be used across sort of learning management platforms, across SISs, across those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And one thing we always make sure of is when Unizin founded in 2014. That was when we started to see sort of the first round of some analytics products and services and tools come out. And a lot of what we saw happening is that some of our vendor partners would ingest or take a lot of data from the university, put it in a black box, put a bunch of artificial intelligence around it, and out came some stuff. And it wouldn't really tell you what's going on in that box, and then you're essentially, in some instances, having to buy your data back. Okay. Right. So there were other providers that started to look at how can we monetize data. And it's not a bad thing, right? It's not. I'm not trying to paint that in a bad picture, but it's like, okay.
Well, you have to. I mean, we're all sitting at this conference, right? I mean, I'm gonna, like, LinkedIn is right there, right? Like, I'm pretty sure everyone's trying to monetize data.
Right.
At the end of the day, right?
So one of the things that we believe as a consortium is that our members should never have to buy their own data back, and their data should never be put into a black box, right? A black box algorithm that they don't know how things are coming out the other end, like what processes and statistics are going on around those. So from that perspective, it's open in that each member institution has their own what we call UDP tenant. So the data doesn't mingle unless the universities explicitly want it to mingle. Okay. Right? And they have their own processes and things like that guide us in helping them work across the institutions. So in that respect, like it's all sort of isolated to the institutions. But what we can do is when one institution, for example, I'll call it Michigan. Michigan has an application called My Learning Analytics. It's like a student-facing application that's designed to help students build metacognitive skills, time management, lifelong learning, those kinds of things. And that sits on top of the Unizin data platform. Okay. So what we've been able to do now is host that on behalf of the consortium. Michigan, since you're Unizin, if you can host this for us, we'd like to make this available. Sure. So we now have other members of the consortium standing up, their own versions of the My Learning Analytics application. So students can now see that inside the Canvas at the University of Florida, for example, which is another member, and at Penn State, and those kinds of places. So we're trying to do more of that. It turns out it's hard because oftentimes people mingle the Unizin data platform data with local data sources. So some of our members use advising data in different ways, and that data comes into an application next to the Unizin data. So in those instances, it's kind of hard for us to host an application because it's not solely on the Unizin data platform, right? It's local, it's localized, it's within that environment of that institution with our data platform as a part of it. But we are working to create more data marts and APIs that we may not be able to host the entire application. But if people have interesting representations of student activity or engagements to begin, you see a lot of people that have really different ways to calculate student activity and create analytics around that. And the thing that's interesting from the research side, statistical methods are different. Some of the data inputs are different. They all seem to work for what they're doing, right? Whether it's advisor-facing, student-facing, faculty-facing, they all seem to generate interesting analytics that help inform decision-making.
So I want to take me there because one of the interesting conversations I've had over the last year beyond engagement, because that's I think I almost feel like that's, for lack of a better, that's like a platform. If you're thinking in terms of software, like engagement is the platform. Do you have any specific success stories that you could talk about, both around identifying challenged learners, so learners at risk, but also I think there's more and more people that are interested in talking about extracurricular or advanced learners or learners of they're excelling, and say, wait, we need to take them in. Can you? I love specificity. Could you give would you have any of those kind of success stories?
Yeah, we'll start with kind of the first example there of some examples where students maybe were in distress, or students where the data helped with that. So COVID was a great example of everyone's remote, right? The data becomes increasingly important at that point. So there was one instance, and at this point I was at Penn State, which was a Unizin member, so we had an application there that essentially registered every 24 hours, did three things. So first, it collected all the activity data in every course, mostly from Canvas. They've added Top Hat and some other data streams now. Okay. So it first collects all the event data from each course. And then what it does is it calculates a rolling 7-day average of each student in every class. The reason for that is some students come in every Sunday all day to the learning management system, some spread it out, right? So the rolling 7-day average captures some of that differences in work streams. And then if you have that data, a rolling 7-day average for a student, you can create what you might think of as like the average fictitious student in that course.
And then you kind of create a model, or you
and then every 24 hours you do comparisons. So every 24 hours you're comparing against that fictitious average student, and sometimes you see students drastically go like this, right, in the data. It's like, okay, well that's wrong. And the interface has ways to try and draw your attention to scenarios, right, in the data. And what we had happen is an advisor, this was an advisor-facing application, the advisor reached out to the student, and the student had COVID, right? And all the universities had all sorts of protocols, right? So if you get COVID, all the support kicks in. What had happened is he lived with 3 roommates that all got COVID before him. Right. So he called his home physician in a different state. So here's what's going on. What should I do? And the physician said, I'm pretty sure you have COVID. Don't do anything, right? Stay home. So the university COVID sort of support mechanisms never caught it, never kicked in, right?
He never ended up reporting in, and those guys, right?
Yeah, so it never kind of went through the channels that are supposed to catch those. Right. And it turned out that happened a lot more than you would guess, right? That, family physicians going home because people felt sick. So advisors were almost the first ones to know in those instances because of the data. The data showed these sharp declines in the students that had very active patterns of engagement. So that was kind of interesting, and one of the first examples we saw there in that case where, it's the advisor is the one now to kind of activate all the support mechanisms and things like that, versus the office that was kind of the COVID office that was also doing that in some cases. So
I want to go to the advancing student, right? The one who that we're looking at. Wow, we need to maybe give a different kind of support. But speaking of that avatar that you're creating, is that something that you could also do a cross-institutional comparison and create either regional avatars or even just a whole system-wide avatar? Is that possible as well?
Is it possible? Yes. Is it something people would want to see done?
Sure, I know that.
Right.
Minority Report.
Yeah. One thing we find at Unizin is, our members are very collaborative, and they share and they work together very well. But there's a fine line there when you start comparing them to one another.
Okay.
Right? And sometimes data can paint ill-informed pictures, sometimes not that flattering of pictures sometimes, right? Okay. Sometimes data loses context and culture. So sometimes you could do that, but at the current moment, we don't necessarily do those kinds of things. Universities sometimes opt into them at Unizin. Okay. So sometimes there's universities that introductory STEM courses is a big one, right? Some campuses call those weed out, or faculty, I should say, call those weed out courses, right? We're going to let these students into physics, right? They need to clear this entry-level physics course that's hard by design.
Sure.
So sometimes our institutions will pull together groups of physics instructors and the people that run those courses and say, okay, let's pull data now across these 3 institutions, specifically at those entry-level courses, and see if we can understand how can we use technology and tools, and what behaviors do we see that are sort of indicative of successful students, and then try and promote those and scaffold those and draw attention right? Like, here's what it usually leads to positive outcomes here, right? These are the kinds of behaviors we see that generally lead to, you know, an A, B, or a C, not a D or an F or a withdrawal, you know, on that layer of courses. So those things are more, they happen, they're more opt-in, right?
Well, and let's take that. I kind of maybe want to circle back there because I'm interested in the people, you know, as we're moving into the future. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm interested in the person. Let's just ask it right now. Like the personalities in a system that are interested in more of those kind of collaborative, connective, holistic thoughts around, like, again, institution-wide, regional, like system-wide, regional-wide, those kinds of, and the people who are kind of more like, do you find that it's personality to personality, it's person to person, kind of just what, you know, it's the same person who maybe, I'm kind of leading the witness here, like somebody who loves social media, somebody who's like, no way, I'm not even going to put my face out there. Like, do you find those same personalities?
It's personalities, it's culture. Culture is a part of it too. And everyone is on like some sort of a continuum here where at the one extreme end, it's, oh my gosh, this data is scary, we shouldn't really look at it, it might illuminate things we don't want to see, to the other end, which is, I think, more of where, you know, Unizin sits and our members are either sort of getting there or aspiring to be there. Let's democratize data for the people that need it to help inform their decisions on their job every day, right? Let's try and get the right data to the right person at the right time, inform the decisions that they need to make, right, on a daily basis. In our world, it's mostly around student success initiatives. I was at a leadership institute the other week, and somebody not from the Unizin Consortium spent months putting together sort of a data platform for an administrative group, and they put it in front of the primary stakeholder in the administration, and that person said, you know, this really sort of enables curiosity that I'm not really comfortable with.
Ooh, wow! I want to use that as a soundbite. That is fantastic.
Right. And,
enabling curiosity that I'm not comfortable
right.
with.
Right. And again, is it that person's personality? Maybe. Is it the culture of that university that person sits within? Maybe. You know, I've heard of some other schools that have a really strong sort of faculty shared governance model, and the faculty sometimes worry that, okay, the lens is kind of on the students and the curriculum now. It's not much to turn that lens to the faculty, right? Like, and some faculty get really anxious that, okay, like, we see the writing on the wall, and none of our members are doing this, by the way. I mean, they're not sort of trying to use data to look at faculty, and, you know, that's not happening. But some faculty get really nervous, and they have really strong voices that are advocating against sort of even that first part of that
well, I mean,
journey,
but there's all those cognitive biases. Even if you start, even if you go in with all positive, sort of benign intention, all of your biases and your cognitive, you know, those things come in as well. So I could see why some people say, look, there's just don't even give access. I had a great conversation, I think it was yesterday actually, on the podcast with talking about how so many organizations in like the payment systems around schools, like, you don't even allow access to like the full card number. You never see it. You only see the 4 digits because you don't need to see it, right? So anyway, those kinds of things, right?
Yeah, and it's in places like Educause too, right? They do a lot of these quick surveys around all sorts of great topics. Some of it's analytics, and one of the things that I'm reading on some of the Educause things is it's data literacy and training, right? It's like, it's one thing about how you make it available and get it into more people's hands, but those people also need to understand, okay, what does this mean?
Right.
You know, how do I act with this data in an ethical way, a way that respects student privacy? A great example we see with some of our consortium members that build mostly faculty-facing interfaces, right, that leverage data to kind of show faculty. So, you know, for the one example for Penn State, here's a student sort of graph of how they engage the different learning ecosystem. Here's that sort of average student, right?
Right.
And some are even splitting it up now. Like, here's what an A student graph looks like. By that. So some faculty members just say, hey, you know, I'm going to like just turn this on in a Zoom meeting with the student in office hours and show them the graph. I said, well, I'm not sure if that's the right way to go in every situation, because some students might just see that and think, I need to just click around Canvas, right? You know, and some people, there's a lot of things that can go wrong in that situation. There's sometimes you might want to do that, right? Depending on how you're having that conversation, your relationship with that student, what kind of course you're teaching, right? There are other times that you just want to use that data to sort of inform how you're going to talk to that student, right? You might not even say, hey, like, I have this graph I have access to, it's telling me this. The graph is one of the dozens of data points.
I'm just also thinking as well, like, the difference between, I don't know, I'm gonna really murder some avatars here, but let's just say, your English lit major and your data science major, or someone who's sports science versus, although that's probably really data driven as well. And I'm just thinking that the diversity across possible degrees. I'm thinking, the Berkeley College of Music is going to have a whole different set of students as opposed to MIT, kind of, even though they're both in Boston, right? And so, I guess my question is, you're a CTO. I mean, this is what you do. Tech is your life. Data is your life. And how are we leveling up the data game? Like, if I'm a professor, I'm talking to students. Is it just we're seeing now that a general understanding of data and those things are coming in with that person, or is it still just really variable about? I'm kind of stupid about science kind of stuff.
I think it's not maybe stupid about science, but it's certainly variable, right? I mean, people have different levels of comfort with data. I talked to a CIO, and again, this isn't someone in Unizin, who said, hey, anytime I'm going to bring somebody into my tech organization, they either have to have knowledge in SQL or sort of advanced spreadsheet knowledge. That's everyone, right? Anyone that walks in here. So that CEO was all in on sort of the data literacy. I need, no matter what their role is, I need people to understand data, right? That's a little aggressive, right? But that's kind of.
And it's also interesting. It builds a culture that only looks at things with one way. It creates a hammer.
Maybe.
Right?
I think there's a broad. I know this person well, so there's a broader collection of things going on.
Yeah.
But that was just how important at one point in time that was to this individual. It's like I want to make sure everybody had some literacy.
Yeah.
Right. And how to do.
And you gotta have some criteria for who you're going to select. Anyway. Yeah. So that makes sense.
Yeah. One of the things, though, going back to the comment about diversity of classes, of students, of campuses, the thing we're trying to do now is. Going back to our members are all calculating this notion of activity or engagement differently. They all seem to work well. There's some sort of matrix out there that needs a lot of research. It's like, okay, if you teach a grad level discussion-based course, this is probably maybe the most representative way you can try and use the technology data to calculate some meaningful metric analytics or engagement, right? If you teach that introductory 400-person biology course, it might look like this. If you're teaching hybrid, it might look like this, right? So that's one of the things I'm excited about because we have so many members calculating activity or engagement analytics differently. That's a good next step for us at Unizin, trying to understand why do some work better than others in different contexts and different modalities, right? And try and tease that out. The whole goal being, how do we make these analytics available? Maybe not necessarily applications, but the analytic representations available across our consortium, and almost like a menu or plug-and-play environment. Right? So depending on whether you're an advisor, a student, or a faculty member, you have access to some kind of visualization dashboard. You can best select some sort of representation of engagement or analytics that resonates with the modality, the pedagogy, and the course design.
How far are we from the Canva of data visualization?
The what of data visualization?
Canva. So they took Adobe and made it accessible. You open up your browser and you and I can create a really professional looking graphic and no skills, right?
Yep.
So I know BI is out there. I know you got Tableau. Where it's kind of drag and drop. Are we there?
Yes and no. And it's kind of interesting. I had a lot of conversations coming up to Educause with different members of the Unizin leadership board, and that's a trend. Power BI and Tableau and all that sweet genre of things is growing on campus, which I think is good, right? It's sort of democratizing data. But if you think about where a lot of our data is stored and sort of the method in which it's sort of collected, it's big, it's untenuous, it's intimidating. So the Unizin data platform, just to give you a sense of scale, the average UDP tenant's about 11 terabytes. Some of our bigger tenants can see 5 million events a day coming from students that stream in real time, right? So, Tableau's not going to help you much when you're coming into that sort of raw cloud-based world. Where we're at now is we're trying to draw together the high-value data points, run some calculations on them, and present them in what we call data marts, which are essentially a series of flat tables. Tableau and Power BI do play nicely there. It doesn't require all what my colleague calls SQL gymnastics to wrestle all that stuff together, right, and do those kind of things. So
gymnastics.
Yeah, there you go. That's even better. So we are trying to kind of bridge that gap where you don't need as many technical resources. You can have people that know a little bit about Power BI and Tableau, as long as you provide sort of a layer above the raw sort of database and event data, right? You sort of combine it into a mark. Better yet, APIs. We might get to that here down the road as well. But right now, we're going from, it's that data information knowledge wisdom hierarchy, right? We sit at the data layer. Our members typically were the ones that took their own data from the platform and made information and knowledge. We're trying to help bridge into that information layer with them. It's like, okay, what's the most important data? How do we create sort of bespoke data marks for specific types of end users and make that much more easy to get a hold of, right?
Yeah.
Do things with that. Yeah.
Last question for you. Let's round it out because I want to go back to that identifying that high performer student, that that or class or professor or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, talk to me. What's an example that you have there of, wow, we didn't expect this, and we need to find a new way to support them, or this person needs to shift somehow.
So the obvious place for analytics to start is that on the other side of that fence, right?
Sure,
and that's kind of where the examples go. But you're absolutely right. The idea with analytics is not only can we sort of pull up sort of the floor, we want to raise the roof as well, right? We want to sort of move everything up a little bit. So that includes how do you figure out what's happening at the top. We have some people that have found interesting trend data there, where if you look at different courses across universities, there are some courses in which the highest performers, just from a data perspective, look like the lowest performers, right? They don't show up much in the data. They don't show up much in the LMS, right? They don't show up much because they don't have to. Right? They're well prepared. They maybe already knew the knowledge coming from the previous course or high school. So at that point, it's sort of interesting because the data paints sort of an inaccurate picture. You have to figure out how to bring in other data like current grade, things like that, to balance out the data to make sure people don't misrepresent them as students that actually need academic support. Because clearly their academics are fine.
Yeah,
they're just bored. Right? You need different ways to engage them. So we've seen it in the data. We haven't seen anyone come up with sort of individual strategies yet, aside from just recognizing and promoting it. Like, hey, Ladek, you're doing a great job, right? I can see your grades are really well. I see the last exam you did really well, and just that notion of providing just an acknowledgement from time to time helps keep those people engaged. Maybe sometimes even brings them back. I'd love to see peer tutoring, peer learning opportunities, leading study group opportunities, those kinds of things. When you start to identify those people that know their stuff and just don't appear to be engaged.
Yeah, right? I was just gonna say, I that's really where I find a lot of excitement for myself in these applications because, as you said, when you have maybe one or two high performers in each class, how can they then lift the whole class? And then, I don't know, I feel like there's also that opportunity, how you let them geek out or high perform, I don't know, whatever you want to they kind of have that, hey, let's go flex a little bit. Without necessarily creating a divide, right?
Yeah.
Because that's also a danger as well. I think that you would start to divide out people just like you would divide out low performers. So.
Yeah. But no, I think that's hopefully where we get to soon. Is we're at that first layer. It's the obvious layer. How do you use data to identify people that may be struggling that we can reach out to as early as possible, much earlier than we did in the past? But the next step is how do you figure it out for everyone? So analytics for the whole group. Analytics for everyone. Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking time to come over and speak to me today. Really appreciate it. I wish you the best for the conference. And you're speaking I think you're speaking in about 2 hours.
Yeah,
so 1 o'clock.
Yeah, Kathy's up at 1 o'clock, and then I have a poster session tomorrow with some members of the consortium at 10:15 and 3 maybe. So I'll be around.
Thanks so much.
It's fun talking.
Yeah, I'm great.
You too. Hopefully your audio works out here.
Let's hope.
So what do you use to run your is this street
All right. Let's see what we can see. All right, can you hear us now, Chris? Yay! All right, excellent. I'm going to clip myself in here, and let's get it going. All right. So here, let's see if I butcher your name. Is it Renken or Renken?
It's Renken.
Renken.
Yeah.
So, first of all, thank you very much for being on the eLearn podcast with me here at Educause. First question I'm asking everybody is, have you done this before? Have you been in Educause before?
I have not. This is my first Educause conference.
Super cool. And remind me, when we talked before to set this up, what university you're at?
I'm from McKendree University in Lebanon, Illinois. It's in southern Illinois.
Okay, cool. All right on. What did you expect when you were going to come here? Were you expecting 3,000 people in this huge exhibit hall and all of the different sessions, or like what was on your mind when you first were on your way here?
I did expect like a large exhibit hall with a bunch of vendors, but not quite this astronomical. This is insane. Like it's just so overstimulating, but it's such exciting to see like so many influencers in education and so many vendors to work with. So,
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a great experience.
So you are a part of a panel called the Young Professionals Panel. You haven't spoken yet, but you're going to be doing it when?
Tomorrow at 4 p.m.
Tomorrow at 4 p.m. As I walked through the hallway into here, I see that there's like a young professional section where you guys can kind of collaborate or get to know one another. As someone who's been a young professional a long, long time ago, what does that mean to you? Like, what is it at Educause? Like, what are they calling out about sort of young professional leaders? And is it just simply like, hey, you're coming into the scene as either an educator or a data technologist or something like that, or like what's the purpose behind identifying young professionals?
I think in the history of higher education, there's been more representation of more seasoned professionals. And I think as we continue in higher ed recently, there's been a recent increase in a data pipeline of students to employees in higher education. So I think we as an organization represent that not seeing a demographic. I think it's nice to have a space where we can network with each other and as well as with other CIOs and managers in IT, and just get an understanding of our backgrounds and experiences in higher ed and in our fields.
Cool. I'm going to pause as my technical guy is telling me, Chris is telling me that you're a little far from the mic. Can you like move it up your lanyard there a little bit? Or you can even just hold it if you want.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sounds good. I'm going to do that too. That way we'll both like this. Sounds
Uniform.
Good. So what is it that you, give me your background. Have you already completed your degree and you're already in the CIO path? You're already in the data path, or are you still studying? Like where are you at?
So I completed my undergrad at Illinois State University in creative technologies, where we studied a myriad of multimedia there. We studied user experience design. We studied VR and XR. We studied many Adobe products. It was very project-based program. And I completed my degree there, and I was looking into multimedia design. But I came upon the field of instructional design in my research when I was doing job searching. And I found this position at McKendree for an instructional technologist, in which they were looking for someone with this sort of background, as well as a background in pedagogy and working with faculty on best practices and instruction, which I did have experience as an intern with our writing program at ISU, working with faculty and students on understanding their pedagogy and terminology. So with a mesh of those two entities, I kind of created this skill set for this position, and I kind of made it my own. So
nice.
I'm looking
That's fantastic.
Thank you. I'm looking for a master's in instructional design soon. I'd love to study it further and learn more best practices and further my career as an instructional technologist and future designer, hopefully director of educational technology at a university. So
love the ambition. That's fantastic. And I love that you've got that clarity in where you wanted to go. I mean, when I was coming at my undergrad, I had no idea where I would.
Right.
So when you come to a place like Educause, you said a little earlier, it's overwhelming. Like there are, there's so many different things. As you're drinking from a fire hose, kind of like, which way do I go? Where does it take you in terms of instructional design? Because I see a lot of, like over here, we've got business data. We're a learning management system. You've got LinkedIn, you've got Salesforce. So do they all then, are you then threading the needle to bring them all back to, how do I use this for design? Do you see disparities where you're like, I'm not sure how this fits? Like, how does that work for you?
I think essentially they all mesh together to create that experience for students. In my role, I use a myriad of tools, especially external learning tools, when they're assessing students, for example, or making course content more accessible. For instance, we have Panato at my university for our video content management system, and it just brings more options for student learning. It's a part of universal design for learning, bringing more multimedia into it rather than just reading text. So using all these vendors and tools, I think, creates that student experience, and it is a huge part of my job. I work with vendors to implement those tools in our system to make the students' learning experience at McKendree University the best possible.
How does, talk to me about learner expectations. With all of the respect in the world, you're still kind of close to probably you almost could call them peers who are in undergrad right now, or in master's programs right now. Talk to me about what are kind of expectations about learning environments, learning spaces, interacting with learning material, as someone who's going into the design universe or as a part of the design universe now, what are the baseline expectations that you've found to have engagement, to get that rave, to get that kind of, wow, this was a great class feedback?
I think it all comes down to designing that course for student feedback, not making it just a one-way path, allowing them to be a part of the experience and communication through discussions. And I think working with the program coordinators, you can use all these tools effectively to meet those outcomes and include the students in the conversation. So.
Okay, excellent. Is there anything? So, I guess one of the things in my mind, a great one of the jargon pieces that we've heard of for so long is gamification. Is that still a huge tool that people are using now, or are we calling it something different? Is there something else that we're looking at in order to increase engagement in a learning pathway in a design that you're creating?
I think it's still relevant nowadays. I think people are using other methods as well to increase engagement. For example, with our video platform, you can do interactive video quizzing to increase learner engagement and make sure they're understanding the material as they go. So I think it's a multiple options sort of thing. You can use different tools collaboratively together. There's even an increase in VR and XR in learning experiences. I've heard of a nursing program using virtual reality software to simulate patients, their different environments and different situations, what would you in this situation. So I think you can use those different methods, gamification or virtual environments to meet those outcomes.
Sure. Are there any, I guess, we've talked a lot about virtual reality, augmented reality on the podcast in the past. It always seems to come down to that VR and AR have limited use cases. As someone coming into the field right now, do you see, obviously, training physicians, training firemen, safety applications, these types of things. Do you see that as there's a real sort of a finite box that we're going to fit VR and AR into, or do you see it to continuing to grow, in terms of the metaverse and those kinds of things?
I think there is potential for growth. I think you can use it in a variety of applications. It's just going down and realizing the potential for it and kind of designing for that specific purpose. For example, something relevant nowadays, Fortnite, people play that and they have a concert
Somehow we got muted. So I guess we're back. Chris, are we back? Okay, now we're back. I don't know why the mic got muted. So anyway, I guess we missed the last question, but I'll look at the screen more often, Chris. I apologize. Virtual reality tour. Did they give you a drone yet? I haven't given you a drone yet.
No, but I would absolutely love that. That would be so much fun.
Well, I apologize to everyone because we've been sitting here talking. Chris, my colleague, just told me that we've been muted for 5 minutes now, so we'll continue our conversation. As a young professional coming into the field, what are you seeing as the biggest challenges to growth, to finding, like, as you said, you're at a university, you'd like to kind of continue to expand your wings and grow. Like, what are the biggest challenges that you have in starting sort of taking your career forward?
I think just experience alone. I would like to continue dabbling in different fields and experiences as being institutional. I think that's probably the biggest hurdle for professionals right now, is that they don't have much experience to work with, but they have the skill set coming out of their institutions. And I think that's something that leaders need to realize. And sometimes experience isn't everything. You can do on-the-job skills that are learned, but coming out of your degree, you have this skill set to work with,
Right.
that you can continue to expand.
All right. And is that a matter of the time? Is it a matter of budget? Like, what's the limitation, the biggest limitation that you have, in flexing that muscle?
I'd say mostly a mixture of both of that, because you get so caught up in the weeds of like day to day. You're supporting an entire institution.
How big's your your colleagues? How big's the office that you're working with in the instructional design that you're using?
So within my niche field of educational technology, it's 2 of us. But our IT department's roughly 10 people. So we're kind of a smaller staff, but what's nice about that is that we can wear many hats and commit more skills that maybe we might not have in our institution. So I think since we are a smaller staff, we have to deal with more day-to-day responsibilities. So that might be the biggest hurdle. And I think having time to set aside to learn new skills is another hurdle that's added to that.
Okay. All right. What is on the opposite side of that, what's your biggest inspiration? What is your, the thing that you look out there and you say, you talked about virtual reality, you talked about augmented reality. Are there other things, like, are you inspired by other designers, other universities? Are you inspired by technology that's coming down the pipe, anything like that?
Yeah, actually, Rene, she's like a...
Who, sorry? Who?
Rene.
Okay.
Yeah, she's like a very famous influencer in the world of education. So I think listening to talks like that kind of inspires me to dig deeper to what I do during my day-to-day responsibilities. Keep that mindset like student first, putting myself in their shoes again. What's nice is that I still do have that mindset of being a recent graduate, but that just kind of pulls me in from the opposite end, the administrative end of things, and kind of puts me in their shoes.
Interesting.
To design for a student first.
So talk to me about old guard versus new guard as a young professional. I think it's really interesting that the conference itself, prioritizes recognizing young professionals and sort of saying, look, there's new blood always coming into the system, and are there things still happening today? Is there an old guard out there in terms of design, in terms of designing the higher education experience in general, that someone like yourself would say, look, we need to stop doing that, or you're like, it's time, is there any of that urge or anything like that you see?
I still do see that. I see a lot of, when I'm
helping instructors design online courses, they're very much in the mindset of read this chapter, take a quiz, do this discussion board. I think we can go further with that, especially with the video system that we just implemented at my institution. You can do video discussion boards and do video responses and make it more interactive. And using those other tools and technologies such as virtual reality, I think you can go further than just having them submit discussion boards to show that they've met the outcomes for that week, you know.
Right, yeah.
So I think we can take it a step further. There's much more potential.
So final question for you. What other the other people that are either on your panel or that maybe you've been able to mingle with and young professionals, what's the buzz that you've heard from them or you're an instruction designer, are there data scientists, are there what other kinds of young professionals have they called out at this conference?
We do have some young CIOs working with some relationship managers, customer success, stuff like that, like very people person jobs. So I think that in their jobs they've learned a lot of different things, and even I've learned things from them too,
of course,
from their experiences. So it's kind of nice to bounce off ideas off of each other and hear like how their experiences kind of mesh together in previous institutions, even current institutions. So yeah, it's really neat to relate to each other.
Fantastic.
It feels like you're not alone in this.
So if I lied to you, I have one more question. So if you look forward to the end of this academic year and then you look forward to the next, like, is there any certain thing that you're especially excited about in the design world or in the education world? Like, it could be a shiny new object, it could be a process, it could be a new theory or a new idea or something for yourself. Like, is there anything that you're like, I see this coming and I'm interested in?
I'm kind of interested in using more data to drive our decision making when we are setting up these courses for our system. I think our current LMS we're using, Brightspace, it has a lot of potential for using data networks and such to inform our decisions on course success and student success. So I'd really like to use that. It's kind of an exciting thing. Now in the modern world, it's all about data and using that to inform our decision making and everything we do. So,
Madeleine, thank you so much for taking time out of the conference to come speak with me. I really, really appreciate it.
thank you so
Wish you all the best. And it's 4 o'clock tomorrow. We'll have you all listen to your panel.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. We're just live, so I'm just going to see. Chris, can you hear us? Yes. The man says yes.
And all right.
So I'm going to give this to you or son.
I was gonna pull up our notes from the session, but I think we'll be fine.
Let me see. I can. You want
Do you
to?
have the paper notes?
I think I have the paper.
Yeah, let's grab our paper notes. Just
So
in case.
while Rene. Right?
Rene.
You're Rene, but she's Raisha.
Yeah, that's gonna be
Rene and Raisha. So we're here live at Educause. My name's Ladek, and I'm with Open LMS. You can see behind me here, but we're going to be talking about campus inclusivity.
Yes, we are.
Inclusivity in general.
In general, yep. And how we're handling it on our campuses.
So you're
And how we're handling it on our campuses.
I may not
No,
have
this
it.
is good. I can already tell this is going to be a good
I may
conversation.
not. Okay, so we're gonna go. We're gonna just wing it.
And you guys are fresh off your panel.
We are.
From this morning.
Yeah, this
Coffee.
Sweet. So like, was it like an 8 o'clock panel?
It was
Yes.
very.
And we. Hey,
It's all right. Come on in.
How are you?
Say hello.
It's so good to see you. This is my other friend. I'm glad you're here. Yeah, we should have to catch up.
That's what I love about this. This is fantastic. This is why we're live, is because there you go. Fantastic. So, Rene.
Rene,
Why does it say low Rene?
because that's my full name, but I go by Rene.
Okay.
So
So
I'm-
Rene and Raisha. So now,
Yes.
Raisha, you're from Winston-Salem University.
Winston-Salem State University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. And Rene, you're from Utah State.
Yes, I'm from Utah State. I'm the deputy for digital transformation and associate vice president for strategic initiatives. So basically, I get to do the fun stuff that breaks things on campus. It's a fun job.
And I'm the associate provost and chief information officer for the campus. We provide centralized IT support. So I get to do all her fun stuff and maintain services and operations and everything else to the campus. So
Well,
it's a little bit fun.
they pay me to have fun conversation.
That's awesome.
So,
I want to talk.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I want to do.
well, so tell me. Let's just start. Like, tell me about your panel. It was about inclusivity in campuses. Why this is a critical component of the future. What were some of the key points that came out of the panel in the beginning?
Yeah, so the reason we were even involved in doing this panel is because the last 2 years, all of us across the nation have been in kind of upheaval with the pandemic, right? All of higher education in our vertical has been responding rapidly to all the changes. And a lot of our campuses went virtual. And so our students, we started realizing there were unmet needs for our students. So we were pushing everything online, but a lot of us were realizing that engagement and feeling connected and feeling included was something that was missing. And so all of us were trying to find ways to adapt and to solve those problems.
In addition to some of the student support services that we were offering, we were, as she was saying, trying to get everything online to teach and learn. But then, how do I drop classes, or how do I, get the academic advising and stuff like that? And so we had to think of how we deliver services and the entire student experience in a dual modality role, in person and virtually.
Okay.
And being able to switch and provide this kind of the same experience to the students to keep them engaged and inclusive. And so that meant we had to start thinking differently, especially at traditional universities where majority of our interaction is in person.
Sure.
How do I engage the student population? How do I engage my adult learners versus my freshmen? And so I had to create an Instagram account. I didn't have one before because I had to do an Instagram
I was
live
just gonna say,
with the students.
so this is a conversation many of us are familiar with, unfortunately. I would love to hear like some really specific examples around first the identification. It's like, what is the problem? In terms of what sort of either gaps did you see, or where students stopped showing up, or they stopped engaging? Are there specific examples of that? And then how did you solve that, or how did some of your panel members solve those issues?
So for us at Utah State University, the gap came when we needed to start like sending students information about whether they're going to be in person or they're going to be virtual, and how we were going to handle all of the pandemic things that were going on. And we would send them emails and realize that they had a less than 50% open rate, so they weren't getting the communication. So we realized, okay, we're not getting to them. Additionally, we're doing a lot of manual, like throwing things up on websites and doing a lot of manual work that was very resource intensive for the employees, and we weren't fast enough. So we needed to automate some things and make things a little bit. We needed to transform kind of that experience. And so at Utah State, we actually went out and looked for a partner company to help us modernize that kind of that student experience, no matter where the students were. So whether they're locked in their dorms in quarantine, or they're doing things from home, or whether or not they could still feel connected. And so we went forward and purchased a platform, an engagement platform. It's basically can replace the old portal. I don't like to call it a portal because portal's so old. Like,
I was just going to say,
it's so old. Like, I like to call it an engagement platform.
Earlier, you said the term plug and play. I didn't call him out.
Yeah, you should have.
I was like, I mean, even I'm like, wow.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't like to call it a portal, but that's the old concept of the portal is what we replaced with it, with this engagement platform. But it basically modernized kind of the student experience. And so I like to, and this will date me as well, but I kind of like to think of it as like kind of like the social media for the student, because our students are used to the Instagrams or the Facebooks or the Snaps, and they're used to that. That's the way they get.
Kind of wall
That's the way
information.
that's the way they consume. And so we needed to transform our experience so that it was more consumable.
Right.
And so we were able to implement this platform, and we're able to successfully do that. So the people that were on our panel were all people that are implementing in different stages. This engagement platform is called Pathify.
Okay.
And we were all in various stages, and we talked about how we use this new tool to help promote diversity, equity, and being inclusive in our institutions, because students can personalize their information.
Okay.
Yeah, and at WSSU, it's very similar. So we already had a platform, we already had a student portal.
Oh, you already had a platform.
Right.
Okay.
And we're transitioning from our current portal. And in the demo or the presentation we did earlier, I mentioned that our portal is really one-way communication, right? We're pushing information to the students. And our students rely on that portal for access to all of our information technology resources. And then they also rely on it for communication and announcements and events. So they were already conditioned for that. This portal that we're looking at is going to take that up to a next level with the engagement and being able to, have different constituencies in that system. So from applicants, parents, students to alumni, and then other folks as we want to deem, we'll be able to engage them in our ecosystem, which we call My WSSU in our campus. But, it just really helps with that equity approach to access, right? I have our first-time freshmen who are digital natives. They're Snapchatting, they're Instagram reels, they're doing all that stuff. But then I have TikToking, and that's
Forget about TV.
you have to put it on there, right? And so we know that that's important, and that's how to reach them. But we also have this bigger, another category of learners, our adult learners. All of them not going to do TikTok and everything else. So we have to be mindful. They're Facebooking and Instagramming, right? Or not Instagramming, but LinkedIn.
Yeah,
they're using those type of things. And so we needed something that'll help us reach our students no matter where they are, whether they're in person or they're remote. Wherever you are, you should still have the same engaging experience with our university, regardless of mode, right? And so that's our goal. And as we look at transitioning over to this next version of My WSSU, that's going to be really significant and important. As I pointed out in our presentation, we didn't have a dip in our enrollment during COVID because we started thinking differently and engaging in a different manner. The biggest thing that we saw was the mental health needs of our students during COVID. And so we had to utilize our different technologies to engage with them in a virtual manner. So booking appointments, because in the past you had to go up to the student center or the health center to book an appointment. We had to think of that differently, right?
Sure, archaic, man.
Virtual.
Nobody's going to do
But
that.
it was traditional. I think I'm going to turn this up. We were traditional.
Nope, not yet.
Okay, good. We're a traditional campus initially, and so that was okay for us. But as COVID came, we had to think differently. Virtual appointments, virtual sessions, in a HIPAA compliant way. And we ended up having to bring on external partners because we only had two mental health practitioners at the time, and we had to bring in other partners from the community to help with that need because it was just so great. the isolation, folks being at home, and just it was wearing on our students. And now we're seeing on our faculty and staff now, right? Just the need to be on. And now we're looking at the mental health and work-life balance and addressing the needs of our faculty and staff as well.
How in both of your institutions, how hard has it been for the institution itself to flex in this way? I mean, we're in a sector that is known for its slow.
Yeah, very slow.
In the most respectful way, right?
Yeah.
This is not an agile sector, traditional, as you were saying, in your institution. There's a lot of process and sort of machinery. So was this just an unbelievable shift? Has this broken the mold, and now you're finding that the institutions have come out on the other side rejuvenated, evolved, different, in a lot of ways? Did you notice like staff attrition and like people just like, I can't do this?
I would jump in because for us it was very transformative, right? We did things that took us 18 months to do.
Right.
We digitized our financial aid processes, our registrar processes, and took a paper-based process and digitized it into we repurposed our ITISM ticketing solution to address what we call service management now.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did that in like 3 months.
Which is astronomically fast.
Astronomically,
yeah.
right? And it was such a quick win for us, and it showed my staff that we can have a speed to service, and it showed the campus too. It doesn't take us 2 years to roll out stuff, right? We can do this stuff in like 3 months, less than 6 months, to a point where now I have other units utilizing their system. And it doesn't take us 6 months. It takes us maybe 2 or 3 months. Get your forms, get your processes, your workflows in our system, and you start using it. And so we've had, taken advantage of that. And our campus is open to more enhancements and I call modernization so that we can help them be more innovative in the end.
So at Utah State, we actually have great sponsorship during this time. Our president, our vice presidents, they were all, as soon as they heard that our students had this need, they were all, Rene, go fix this, right? Mm-hmm. They were like, let's get this fixed like fast. And so it was the same kind of experience where what normally would take, like an RFP process and going through all of that, we shortened that window and we literally implemented this platform in 3 months, less than 3 months, which was like, it's unheard of, right? Yeah. So I think that because of kind of that whole impact of that, I do think that it's transformed and it's modernized our campus. And then like you said, it's people's assumptions that things need to be longer. I think it's really helped, and I think it's going to be something positive for the future, that higher ed can really be more agile and kind of meet the needs of the students and the vendors and that where they're at. So I'm excited about it.
I think it also helps our organizations to think differently, right? Like this whole process, the pandemic, we're thinking differently, not just the leadership, but like all the frontline staff are thinking differently and coming up with new ideas for enhancing procedures and processes and innovating. It's been a real spark of innovation for within my campus to look at different ways to do things.
So give me a fail.
What?
A fail.
A fail?
So like
fail.
So one of the things that
we're perfect.
One of the things that we tend to avoid, especially in our culture, is talking about that didn't work.
Yeah.
Right? But I think it's also something that when we do talk about it, it not only starts to normalize it, but it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I don't know, I'm a parent, I don't know if you guys are parents, but it's like when you go to the play date with other parents or something and you're like, thank God. I'm so glad that your kids are like that. They really
you're like, oh good, it's not just my family.
So it was there like one thing that you tried that really just fell on its face, or the students were like, nah, that doesn't work, or anything like that you're willing to follow?
I actually do have a couple. So a couple things that when you ask like something that like perceptions, the other flip side of the technology and that spark is a lot of people were, I think it harmed online education a little bit because a lot of people were like, once they just wanted to go back to normal. That was like a really big
Oh,
phrase.
that was a huge.
Like,
Yeah, sure.
let's just get back to normal.
Just get back to the
Yeah,
classroom.
and like even like faculty, staff, even all of us were all like, they're like, we're tired of Zoom, we're tired of that, and they're like, that's going to go away. It hasn't. Every single meeting now has a Zoom link, and there are people Zooming in and out all the time. I think that just by nature, we've just accepted it. You know what I mean? And so, but I think it was kind of hard on the whole online education space because people were like, even parents like had to Zoom like elementary education. Like you're like, oh my gosh, I want my kids back in the classroom. I can't do this anymore, right? It was miserable. And so I think that was something that we learned was that there's got to be a healthy balance, and so it takes time, and user adoption is gonna it really is going to lead out the way we want. So we have students. We're actually redefining our course descriptions, like whether it's online or face to face. We're redefining those because this has changed, and so I think that thinking that we're going to go back to normal, it's gone. It's not normal.
Yeah, and at WSSU, we recognize that, this is the new normal, right? And we're starting to invest in our online and distance learning programs again. We had them, we got rid of them. Now we have to bring them back more formally because we recognize the impact it's having to reducing the time to degree for our students. So, when COVID hit, we did all of our summer courses online, and traditionally that was not the case. You had to come back on campus. Can you imagine coming back for 4-week class? Or it was a hardship for some of our students because then they had to pay for dorms and stuff like that. But when we switched to online, we had over a 60% increase in the number of students participating.
Wow.
So that tells me in passing, right?
So that is access, right?
Right,
And that is the whole part of our presentation was being inclusive and providing access so everybody can come to the table and get what they need from an education perspective.
Yeah, but from a failure, I think, sometimes we were so fast at my campus to deploy technology, especially in our classrooms. So we recognized that none of our classrooms were set up for online or hybrid. And so we went through this whole exercise of making all of our classroom spaces and upgrading all our classroom AV to be hybrid and be able to do either support online fully or, the hybrid modality. We forgot to train people on how to use that.
I don't know how this works.
Come on, everybody knows. You just push that button.
That was our failure. And so now, that was some of the things we're like, okay, this is great, but I don't know how to use it.
Yeah.
But that's just me being a smaller campus. I only had one AV person at the time. Sure. And so, he's working with the vendors to try to get everything else. And I'm like, okay, y'all, we have to circle back and start training people on how to utilize this technology. It's great.
You just saw that in our presentation to do this morning. We all set up and then we were all like trying to figure out how to like do stuff. Raisha, she's all under hook and cord and taking the monitor down. We don't need a monitor. We're fine. Even today that would happen.
I think what so talk to me about that aspect of it. There is a portion of this that there needs to be some entrepreneurial spirit.
Yes.
I'm willing to break. I'm willing to then put back together and be that person. And it sounds like both of you have engendered that spirit. Have you found everybody on the panel? Is that now
that was kind of the feeling.
Is that now sort of campus-wide as well, where people are kind of a little bit, maybe our professors a little bit more?
Our professors are loving it. So I think they're so entrepreneurial. We had to tell them, okay, wait a minute, you're
going too fast.
Your course says it's online, and your course says it's hybrid, but your course says it's in person. You can't just change it because you want to. So that has been an issue moving forward, but my faculty and staff have been so supportive of the changes that we've been trying to implement because, as I pointed out in our presentation, due to lack of funding historically, as a historically Black college and university, we always didn't have the resources, and so we were probably decades behind some of our peer institutions in technology, and so. I think they're open to having the newer resources because it helps them be more efficient, and it impacts our students at the end of the day. Reduces graduation time, reduces debt load, gets them out, and have them be productive members of society. Whether it's be an entrepreneur, because that's our new strategic plan is Unleash the Genius. That every student comes through, they graduate, and they have a business plan in hand, so that they can to build on that entrepreneurial spirit. And so, but I can't do that with antiquated, outdated technology, right? Because that's not what you're going to experience in the real world. And so they've been very supportive and open and adopting, the technology and the things that we're doing. I'd say most resistant to be on the administrative side sometimes.
Interesting.
That business processes type side, they're a little bit slow to make some of the changes. But then they're seeing on the academic side how they've just gone and like BuzzFeed light year ahead with some of the technology that we've been offering to them. And I was very strategic on some of these things, changing our subscription models for some of our tools from being just numbered to enterprise-wide licenses. So I could just bring on these people and not say, oh, we're going to charge you blah, blah, blah per user per year. I removed that barrier. I want you to utilize this technology as a strategy so they can help our students and help improve their experience.
What about that mind shift too? I don't know if this happened on your campus as well, but it's like, I was actually speaking with another colleague yesterday about this. And I'm going to try to characterize it where you're moving from a service model to a capacity problem, right? So it's like you went from can we serve, like, here's the ticket coming in, to wait, I've got this enterprise license, we have the capacity to do that. I'm just going to then make sure that you have access to those resources. Does that make sense? Was there any kind of that evolution? I mean, what I'm really kind of looking for when we're thinking about how these institutions have evolved or changed, I'm just wondering, like, have there any of those other mindsets that have shifted within your institution? It sounds like it was truly like an evolutionary moment.
Oh yeah,
right? You went to this totally entrepreneurial model. Did
right.
the same kind of thing happen at Utah State or anything?
In some ways, yes. We were already in the technology space. We were pretty advanced, and we had a lot of support and a lot of enterprise licenses already because we were early on like Canvas adopters and things like that. And yeah, right. Utah, yeah, exactly. And so. Exactly, but I think that for us, that our mindset was we already had some of those in place, and so we went ahead and did exactly what you said. We said, all right, we're just going to open the door and let everybody do it, and then on the back end, we'll figure it out financially. Yeah. And we did that, a lot of things, and that wasn't always the case. So I think that shift in mindset was really transformational. It really helped because they were just like, you know what? Like, for instance, we didn't have Zoom when all of this hit, and we got Zoom quick.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just things like that, we just were like, let's figure it out. And so I think that it was very entrepreneurial.
Yeah. Were there any curveballs that came out of your panel today? That's one of the things that I wanted to learn was people who came to listen to your talk. Was everybody just kind of nodding their head the same way, and they're like, oh yeah, this stuff? Yeah. Or did anybody offer a different perspective?
You know what?
What did you
I don't think that was a really curveball, but we actually had one of our other participants. She's deaf, and so her whole presentation we had interpreters.
Yeah.
So that was different for all of us because we had to practice ahead of time and understand the cues and figure out how to do that, and then also just to have a presentation that inclusive, and that was really phenomenal.
That was awesome.
It was awesome.
It was the best representation of inclusivity that I could even think of.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was very cool.
That's really
so
cool.
It wasn't like anything that was shocking or but it was just a really great experience. And we also had attendees that were hearing impaired that they were signing to as well. So we really had an interactive, inclusive session this morning.
What's the feedback been from the students on your campus in terms of these transformations, mental health support services, different ways of thinking? Has it been a big rave? Has it been like it's about time? Has it been like then the sub part of that, has it changed your ability to recruit? Has it changed your ability? Like, are you selling the university differently at this stage?
So for us at Utah State, I think by our user adoption, looking at our clicks and our data, our students are definitely using this engagement platform. It's like we have the usage just went up skyrocketed. When you ask for a failure, another failure is we thought that in December of that year, we thought texting would be great, but people can unsubscribe like that. So that was one of our failures is we were thinking we could fix it, and then we were like, no, we need something more mobile. Yeah. And so we look at the data, and we're very data driven, and we realize that our students are really using this tool, and that they it's just kind of like the voting by where they put their clicks, right? And so that's been a big success there. What was the other part of your question?
If it's changed the way that you position the university in terms of bringing in new students, recruiting,
yes,
I can see how it's changed.
It's changed us for certain. I mean, our students were, used to being in that portal and accessing things, and so that wasn't new for them. But some of the things that we were doing was new. So the online advising, the virtual health sessions, mental health sessions, and things of that nature. Um, Graduation being online and augmenting it with, when we went back in person, we still augmented with do your little 20-second script thing and share with your family. It has changed how we think about recruiting on our campus. I think the biggest change for us, and I think our students are more appreciative of, is that our faculty and staff and our administrators are more engaged digitally and how they do their business processes and things of that nature versus being hesitant and scared. They're being more natural to utilize the technology that we have in place for working with our students and staff. And so the students get the end benefit of that by having things be streamlined, barriers removed, and that they're having a better experience overall. So it's been great for my campus. I'm gonna say we love it, and I'm excited to get to that level with our new portal, our student engagement center, by having that in one spot. And so, our campus is pretty much, as far as digital literacy and digital innovation, we're Adobe Creative Cloud campus, one of the first HBCUs in the country to be listed as such, and we're utilizing the digital literacy and skill set to give our students a competitive advantage once they graduate. So whatever we can do to help that along, we're passionate about at WSSU.
Awesome. What about you? Is there a different way that you're selling those?
Yeah, so we have a variety of different student population. We have the traditional students that want to come to our campus and have that freshman year traditional student experience, that life experience, and then we have a lot of non-traditional, post-traditional students that are especially in Utah, they have a very young parent population. And so we have a lot of people that stop out and then come back, and then they're still young, but they have a different lifestyle. And so for us, we have different groups. So for our traditional, we have a lot of parent involvement. So being able to have the My USU for the parents, and that's been really that's been that's a good. And then also from our post-traditional, having the mobile app, being able to have them be able to do things right from their phones, that's been a huge a value add. It's a game changer. Yeah. It's a value add because these parents are at work or on their lunch hours, and they need to be able to register and pay their financial aid. And so it does change the way we recruit and the way we talk about things with these different types of students that we're recruiting. In fact, tonight here in Denver, we're having a USU recruiting event.
Oh,
exciting.
Yeah, excited. Wow. Yeah, I didn't even know. I got here, they're like, "You're in Denver? You need to go over there and recruit." I'm like, "Okay, I'll be over there." It's like in some other town over across the way.
That's awesome, though.
Fantastic. Yeah. So, final question for you: what's the next step in this inclusivity journey for both of your campuses? I mean, is it step back, take a deep breath, and see what works and what doesn't work? Is it, oh no, there's a couple new shiny objects that we're bringing in, but no, we've got the next step in our vision, our path that we're already implementing? What's 2023, 2024 look like for you?
So we have a lot of activity around this whole DEI initiative. We have just hired in a vice president for diversity. We implemented this new transformational engagement platform, and we have a lot of other initiatives around that as well. But from the platform and the Pathify thing, I'm ready to go on to the next big thing. They have a digital ID, so students don't have to have a card. They can just swipe.
Yes, please.
Yes, right. And then you can manage
Everybody's
the
got
data.
a phone.
Yeah, everybody's got a phone. They're gonna leave their room, their dorm room, and go somewhere. And they're not gonna leave their phone. They're gonna leave their ID. And so that, I think for me, that's kind of my next one. My wish list is to get something so that they have their digital ID with them, and then analytics around that would be amazing because then it'll help us plan for resource and capacity issues and things like that around football games or things like that. So we definitely have a roadmap and have a lot of things. Our staff and faculty are now the next phases for us too, is because they're going to be using the same portal. So we have an educational widget and things like that. So I'm not just going.
I was just going to say, it's almost too much energy.
Yeah, too much, right?
I know. I have a lot of.
That's why they give you the 8 o'clock panel.
At WSSU, we're in a different stage as far as on our portal, and we're trying to just transition from our existing portal to Pathify.
Okay.
So our focus for this year right now is the student population. Next will be our faculty and staff because they saw the portal and they've been wanting the portal They've been wanting something for a hot minute. And so we'll be looking at bringing them on and then other constituencies later on in 2024. We have a high use of different apps. And so we'll be looking to consolidate some of those apps and utilize Pathify to help with that engagement, especially on our alumni side,
Okay.
especially when it comes around to homecoming and things of that nature. Just giving them a platform to engage with the campus. And then we have a lot of DEI initiatives as well, because we've just unveiled our new strategic plan for the next 8 years. And DEI is one of our strategies moving forward. And so, getting the metrics and putting that from plan to action will be some of the goals that we have for 2023 and 2024. So we're really excited. We got a lot of projects that go in
Or
support of
high
that.
energy over here.
I love
Yeah.
it. I wish I would have come to the panel. I would have been able to, but thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming
thank
by. I
you.
really
Thank
appreciate it. I wish you
you.
best at Educause. Hope the rest
you.
of the day is great.
Appreciate
Meeting
it.
you. And talk to you later.
We'll talk
All
later.
right. Have a
Ciao.
good one.
Bye.
Bye. That was fun.
We do
So, Chris, I just want to confirm. Can you hear me? All right, great, fantastic. So we're now back again with Randy Shore of Kion.
Yes.
Excellent. We're going to talk about. I'm going to move this out of the way. And so I want to first tee you up as what tell me. Let's give a little plug. What is Kion? What do you do? And what services are you offering in the education space right now?
Sure. Yeah. Obviously with Kion, so Kion is we call it a cloud enablement platform. It really combines sort of cloud management and cloud governance together. And so really what that means to us is that we're focused in sort of four main areas. So financial management, continuous compliance, identity, and automation orchestration within the public cloud. So AWS, Azure, and Google. And so my role there, I run what we call our delivery and support team, which is really the technical side of the customer journey. So I work with everybody from prospects who are first seeing the product all the way through to onboarding, implementation, support, training. All that falls under myself and my team. And so specifically on the higher ed side, we are actually really excited. So we actually just last week announced a partnership with Internet 2. So we went through a service evaluation where we were vetted for sort of everything we do across accessibility and functional eval and contracting and everything for the higher ed community. And so there are a number of areas that we really sort of work with in higher ed. So my background, I should also point out, before I was at Kion, I actually was director of IT at George Washington University. And so I know I mentioned it on LinkedIn actually, but like in my interview for this position, I said to my boss, who's CEO Brian, I was like, I'm either going to buy a license of Kion because I need it at GW, or I'm going to come work for you. And obviously that's where I am here. But really what we see is cloud adoption is definitely growing in higher ed, right? And there's many things that stalls cloud adoption, namely like cost overruns are always the major thing. There's always a concern from security that now, it's already hard enough to protect in higher ed institutions network on campus, but now that you've extended that, across the U.S. or across the world, how do you enable researchers to use a lot of those cloud services? And so, sort of all of those areas are where we fit in. I'm happy to talk in specific.
I was just going to say, I think you just ruined the entire interview.
I was going to say, yeah, I didn't shut up, but I'm sorry. the copy's kicked in.
I love it. No, so I want to start kind of backwards forwards because I always seem to end these conversations with the data privacy question.
Yep.
I want to put that front and center now because I know the number one thing that hits my desk or comes in is like the cloud is scary, right? Because I don't know what my stuff is, and even people are there was a time there where kind of everybody didn't care, but Facebook people are backing away from it. Instagram, they're backing away. I mean, maybe not the younger generation, but there's a lot of concern around it. And then when we talk about student data, HIPAA data, it's not only there's a lot of payments data, there's self-identifying data, all that kind of stuff. So talk to me around why we shouldn't be scared of the cloud. First of all, or not. I mean, we're all kind of in it, but what your presentation today is about. How do you have a well-managed range? Talk to us about privacy in specifics. Like, I'd love to either hear some best practices or some fails or something like that.
Right. No, absolutely. I think when people think of the cloud, what you're not realizing and what a lot of folks don't realize, or maybe where their underlying fear comes from, is like when you hand over access keys to an account or a user to an account, you essentially have given them a key to their own data center, the world's most powerful, largest data center in the world, and said, good luck, right? Don't screw it up. And so really where success comes from is obviously why we're in this space is governance, right? A good governance model where, you can only go as far as an organization is comfortable to allow you to do that, right? And so typically, that gets into different compliance programs, like, what exactly is HIPAA or FERPA or something saying about cloud? I think where the challenge then comes from that is all these compliance programs that are out there to protect data are guidance and suggestions, right? None of them are playbooks. None of them say, to put health information in the cloud, go in and check this box and have this control and everything, right? And so it's the work that it takes to take this sort of guidance that says, things like only authorized people should have access to that data. Well, what does that mean, right? That means that we need to make sure we have good cloud identity, that only the folks that should see that data can have that data. We need to make sure that, we don't have S3 buckets open to the world, like sort of those easy underlying things. And so that's a lot of what we do at Kion when I work with customers all day, is to secure that.
Well, no, but I mean, how many people know what an S3 bucket is?
Right.
So, I mean, so take me there. Like when you're having at your level, at the VP
Yep.
level. I mean, you're talking with CTOs, CIOs, these kinds of individuals. How far down the chain do you need to go to create comfort, to create trust, and just sort of that, like bring people in sort of an education or university setting? Is it
Right.
just down to the dean level? Do you have to all the way go down to the professors, the students?
So yeah, typically, so far at least, we haven't had to. I've spent many years working down at the professor level and the research lab level and the PI level, but thankfully at Kion, right, it's sort of more, one of the things that specifically like at say like the C level or like the dean level, right, is really what having those controls in place don't just help with cloud adoption. Really where it means and matters to them is it helps you ultimately be able to apply for and ultimately get new research grants, right? And so working with especially a lot of the R1s and R2s, that ability to say like, listen, if we provision an entire environment that is HIPAA ready or complies with CMMC if you're using federal data or whatever, that is what ultimately enables cloud, right? That you're not handing over this data center, right? You're giving exactly what they need and only what they need in a self-service manner, because ultimately, most folks understand, like if you put control in higher ed, often leads to, especially for sort of the academic side, to go around it, right?
Right.
It means that they're going to swipe their P card and go out and get an AWS account or whatever, and ultimately IT loses all control. And so there's a delicate balance between sort of control and experience, and I think that's, again, obviously not just about Kion, but one of the major things that leads to, going back to my session, which is actually tomorrow at 4 o'clock.
Sorry.
Yes, no worries. So if you're here, 4 o'clock tomorrow, room 601. But outside of that, I think that's really what leads to that sort of well-managed range, right? Is that, all of your fences are intact. You're not having any animals on the other side.
Right.
That's essentially what.
But in this universe of academia, do you find that they're like, where do those entrepreneurs show up? Because, again, the mindset is still like, all right, look, there's a structure. This is traditional. We know what and that's been one of the big resistance to transformation writ large, right?
Yep.
And so, where are those people at? Like, are there tons of them everywhere? It depends on the personality.
Yeah. So I will say, like, especially cloud in higher ed and our commercial customers and our federal customers, it is not just another thing that's tacked onto somebody's plate. We're seeing a lot of organizations develop like a cloud team that's responsible for understanding the academic mission, the research mission, the administrative mission, how to run the business, and ultimately, whether that's to close data centers ultimately, or really to bring all of this sort of cutting edge technology to the classroom or to the students or to the research labs, this cloud team is sort of responsible for it. And so that's often falling somewhere in the IT organization. But ultimately it requires, and again, depending upon, and then it's one of the parts of the session tomorrow is, talking about models, right? Is it decentralized? Is it centralized? Do we need to get buy-in at the school level? And ultimately in a decentralized model, you do.
Right.
And it's that balance to say, we call it guardians at the gate a lot, right? We're not coming in cloud governance, cloud management, cloud enablement, right? The reason we sort of call it cloud enablement is to go against this idea of like guardians at the gate, right? You don't want to be a no person. The whole point of cloud is to enable an organization to move forward, putting in controls because of whether it's fear or you're not prepared or you don't know how to take the security controls matrix that HIPAA has and apply it to actual policy. That gets difficult, right? And so that's where we want to make sure that you're enabling them, not to overuse the word, but you're enabling them to move forward quicker or faster and get to the actual benefits of it. And so again, that can happen anywhere, but it's painting that vision across all levels of that organization, namely though within sort of this cloud team that's being developed.
So take me to the next bucket, for lack of a better term, of financial management, essentially. Because I know, I'll plug our company, OpenL. It's one of the things that we think about a lot because we host on AWS as well. And it's like, so how do you take down the server time, these things? What is that conversation first? Is it just kind of like, hey, we've got this license and so now just kind of
Yep.
You know, go hog wild and do whatever you want. Like,
Right.
what are the points in the conversation, and how do you mitigate those points?
Yep.
You know, what's the best practice there?
Absolutely. So yeah, cloud. That's outside of all of the security controls and concerns and everything like that. Right. Nothing scares an organization more than
Sure, because I mean, it's like here's the
it's a blank check.
Exactly. Here's the
Yep.
blank check, and
Yep.
you kind of go for it.
Exactly.
Especially like a
And
research
so-
team or whatever. They're just
right,
like
yeah.
hungry.
And so
right?
there's not just the I don't want to spend more than I have. There's the okay, when I'm legitimately spending what I do have, how do I attribute this back? Right. I've got researchers who are using grants. I've got department budgets. I've got startup funds and 5-year planning funds and everything. Like, how do I do all this cost attribution? Right. And that is very much sort of where and why we developed Kion. We actually spun out of sort of the federal government initially, and so we actually spun out of a government systems integrator, worked on this what ultimately became Kion as a small program for this agency that had a desire to move 10,000 developers to the cloud, and they needed to know that they weren't going to overrun, they weren't going to violate in the federal space. There's an Anti-Deficiency Act which says it's illegal to spend money you don't have. So they were like, well, we can't just write a blank check, right? There has to be an upper limit.
Isn't that everywhere it's illegal to spend money? No,
Yeah,
sorry,
one would wish, but ultimately you just have to figure out how to pay for it, right? Or take out a loan or whatever. But yeah, so that's sort of like a big strength of ours is not just sort of all the security controls, but cost attribution. So knowing that this researcher who's going to use this has $5,000 from this grant, and ultimately being able to run a report at the end of the month and say, I know I owe AWS $1 million and Azure $1 million and Google. Where do I pull those, that $3 million from, right?
Wow.
How do I get to that? And so
right there, like all of the parts just clicked in my head about the complexity, and especially in like a large research university.
Yes. Yep.
Did you just scare the crap out of a lot of people listening? And like, is that hard to manage? I mean, okay, Kion is a platform that helps do this, but do I have to draw a lot of lines there, or how does that even begin to work?
Yeah, so honestly, outside of having tools, whether it's Kion or anything else, it's a crowded market for a reason, right? It is a complex problem that every organization has. Very few organizations say, okay, we just have one cloud budget, everybody just spend it and we'll figure out how to pay for it, right? And so there are native solutions in every cloud provider that allows you to say, set up an email when I spend a certain amount of money or something like that. The attribution, though, to understand that from this pot of money, from this cost center inside of my institution, that is funding these 3 workloads, which ultimately are these applications, and that is again a lot of why Kion exists, what sort of problems we're trying to solve, whether it's for higher ed or anybody. But obviously it's more complicated when everybody has sort of this like bring your own sort of checkbook to the table. And again, right, all of that I'm always going to go back to like the customer experience, especially in higher ed, because if it's not a self-service experience, if it's not easy, if it takes 3 weeks to get a new cloud account, the researcher is just going to go around it, right?
Yeah,
and that ultimately
absolutely
opens you up for a world of disaster later. And then you got to try to figure out how do I consolidate everything too. So yeah, that is that nut can continue to crack.
Yeah.
There's a lot of shells there. Yeah.
I don't know what question to ask.
Yeah.
What's the third bucket?
Man. So I guess the next thing is probably on the identity piece. So managing identity in higher ed, I know, again, my background, when I came to Kion as a product company, this is the first product company I worked for, I was like, we need to get identity right if we're going to ever enter higher ed. Higher ed is the only place where, on a good path, right, 25% of your population turns over every year.
Right.
You have a whole new set every 6 months, every new semester. Most software vendors on the market, right, are thinking about a commercial enterprise where you hire, you fire, nothing's crazy. When you build for something like that, not only do you have this huge sort of new population of students or staff or faculty that you're hiring, you have all the people that are graduating or leaving for one reason or another. And so being able to not just make it so, again, it's really easy for folks to get in when they should, but more importantly, how do you cut off access when they leave, right? And so that's a really big area for us, especially in the higher ed space, is unifying identity across all 3 cloud providers, right? And so everything that we do, we really do for sort of at least two main areas is visibility and control, right? everything I've been talking about of controlling spend, ensuring that they're not using services and regions and things that don't comply with HIPAA, being able to do financial management, right? That's all control. But ultimately, from that, the benefit to the business or the institution is visibility, right? What am I spending across? How much am I spending in AWS versus Azure? What department within the School of Engineering is spending more than another, right? And being able to drill in, then ultimately, obviously, everyone's favorite topic in the cloud then becomes cost savings. So once you get visibility, then what can you do with that, right? And so, not to go back to cost, but yeah, identity is I'd say a huge piece for higher ed that we're really working on.
How do these applications bleed over into corporate relationships after higher ed? Journeys for students, or connecting learning staff or teaching staff with, again, professional opportunities, or like, because a lot of professors either moonlight and have consulting gigs or what else. How does that, what's the mesh there?
For sure. So it's actually funny. So one of the, I know, again, working at GW, there was always that conversation, especially when we introduced a tool into like the student population, was the pedagogy, right? Are you affecting? If you make something too easy in the classroom, where a student just goes, they click a button and everything just happens for them, and they expect that when they get into the workforce, they're going to have the same button to click and it's just going to happen, and it's not, right? And so how do we not make that easy button too much of an easy button? Ultimately, is sort of what that is. And again, like going back to my, I mentioned like my interview where I'm like, I'm going to buy a license or you're going to hire me, right? Like I was trying to solve a problem where my data science program at GW was just getting off the ground, and they needed access to high performance computing. And ultimately, I had an option of, do I go to somebody like Dell or whatever, and I buy a cluster and I have a big capital expense and it's got to work, but maybe the class is only going to use it for one semester, right? It's not taught every semester. So that was really my first use from like the cloud makes sense, right? But it's also scary. So what if I were to amortize those lease payments down to a semester? Like, what is that going to cost me? And ultimately, what else will I gain out of that? And one of the biggest things was, now we're gaining real life experience for these students or data scientists that when they go out to an organization, most of the time that they're crunching those numbers, they're going to be using the public cloud, right? And so, again, one of the ways in which we sort of handle that at Kion, and not to completely keep plugging Kion, but it's my background, I think, in this area that's like helping with how a lot of the product decisions are made sort of at the time. So I've been at Kion now for 3.5 years, and we're like 4 years old. So a lot of that has come from that, but. It's to not sort of put a layer between Kion and the cloud provider, right? Our goal is to give you that cloud native experience specifically for whether it's you're already in a commercial organization and there's you already know how AWS works or Azure works or Google works or whatever. We don't want you to have to learn something new, but ultimately in the higher ed space that translates to student experience, right? How do you give, again, what like the thought of giving a student a cloud account is frightening for a lot of institutions still. They haven't quite embraced it for the academic side as much from what I've seen.
Break that down, though. When you're saying giving them layman's terms, giving them Google Drive, giving them giving them a login to what?
Yeah, giving them a login to like the AWS console where they can technically spend thousands of dollars in seconds, right? And like you can spend literally.
Is there really high demand for that? Is that a big?
So like I think an example is like the data science program, right? They want to use high performance computing clusters. They don't want to buy that, and there's awesome services. And I think more and more. Public cloud itself is not about somebody else's data center, right? It's about managed services. And so managed services allow, you to spin up you have a huge data set and you need to store it somewhere, quickly, whether that's raw storage or you need to be able to throw it in a DynamoDB or something like that from AWS as a managed sort of high throughput database, right? Like previously you had to go about building that, and that might have actually stopped a faculty member from, say, putting that into their curriculum because they don't want to spend 2 weeks building something.
Right.
Now, you literally log in, you click a button, say, I want this, and it's provisioned for you in seconds, and you get off to the races, right? And so more and more, I think professors will bring it more into the classroom, but having that native experience so that students aren't just learning what how to data science. They're also learning how to use the tools that you're going to use when you get out of the workforce to data science later. Yeah.
What opportunities have you seen on the other side? And I don't even know if this is a valid question of those public data sets. Some of the research I've seen in the past are large scale data sets from like mobile phone companies, banking. It's been anonymized, but then you can look at so many different things from migration pathways to what people are buying or when they're buying, like when there's like a flu outbreak or something.
Right.
Are those opportunities being presented more and more? Like I'm just thinking of the instance you just described where, all right, my students need a data set to work on. We have a problem set.
Yep.
So are those just already out there and you can click it?
Yeah, so there's a number of those. And then I also know that there's also like programs within the cloud providers themselves that are basically funding you to run your research on open data sets. So, for example, one of our customers is NASA. NASA and AWS have a partnership on like this open data registry, these ODR projects, where taking NASA data, satellite imagery, AWS is storing it for them for free, so that folks can go in and sort of process that, right? Do geospatial analysis that is way beyond anything I know, right? I know that, like,
come on, give yourself some credit.
Exactly. But like, I know that those kinds of partnerships is all about enabling, right? I know, even an interesting thing like on the health side, there's so much data out there that ultimately we have the technology, we have the machine learning to like compute and crunch that obviously the cloud is like powering and enabling. Ultimately, what it comes down to is more of like society's willingness to share it because of all of the ways in which data has been used improperly over a few years, right? And so, exactly. Like the accumulation of bad has potentially stifled some of the good, right? Like potentially there's enough health information out there and enough compute power to crunch it that like the cure for cancer is possible, just people won't share enough data for it, right? Like those kinds of things become possible in the cloud, not just because they're building products and solutions and services for it, but ultimately like an organization to crunch something of that size on their own is such a large capital investment that they just wouldn't do it, right? And so it's economies of scale sort of kicking.
So we're at Educause. We're talking about, you're interfacing with all your higher ed clients or looking for new ones. What are the three biggest things that an institution like George Washington University gets wrong? Educate them about in your talk about how do you keep this well managed? Like what are those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think the three major things are cost attribution, right? There's a lot of organizations that are in the cloud and frankly just don't even know how to pay their bill, and that is ultimately slowing them down from moving forward. I think the other big one is sort of as I mentioned for like the R1s and R2s especially, how can they unlock cloud to researchers to qualify or satisfy grants more, right? So how can they do better, bigger research projects? And then probably I think the third one, based in, and again, I'm presenting with Texas A&M and University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC tomorrow, is identity. So same thing, right? Is how do you provide that unified experience across all three cloud providers, since they have footprints in all of them, right? And that literally, if not, becomes those same 3-4 problems in one provider, you have the same 3-4. So like it's like compounding interest, right? And so looking to solve that in a unified way is the only way in which organizations will actually be able to adopt and scale.
Why? Okay, I thought I had that. I thought that was the foundation, but why does everybody have a footprint in all three? Why is there not exclusive relationships? Like, what's the benefit?
Yeah.
Are there different flavors? I mean,
yeah. So
these are all electrons.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think when public cloud first started to come out, right, it was all about infrastructure as a service, or IaaS, and it was pretty much a level playing field, right? I don't want to host this server in my data center. I want to host it in your data center, and it was apples to apples to apples. But now, as I mentioned, like with managed services, which are complete applications built on top of cloud that are just offered as SaaS, right? Now they're all unique, right? Like, I don't think that there's any question that Google is incredibly good at like big data, like one of their services, BigQuery, is incredibly awesome at like large data sets, data visualization, right? Whereas maybe AWS is focused on, whether it's large storage or, really fast, like ability to send like events across different apps, for example. Every cloud sort of has its niche, right? You know, on the Microsoft side, they've done a really good job in making like a one-click button from your on-prem database SQL to the cloud, right? That's going to give them that edge in that area. And so it's now apples to oranges to lemons, right? And ultimately, again, in higher ed, the administrative side of just running the business, right? That's typically one that, you know, we don't want to be in a data center. We're probably going to almost exclusively be in a provider. But ultimately, when you start bringing in the research side and ultimately the academic side, it's those sort of managed services that force you into those areas. And again, ultimately, if IT and universities don't embrace it, that's not going to stop researchers from getting there, right? So you might as well, if you can provide a solution that gives them secure, unified access to it, then you're in control, right? And that's really all about what it is, and it speaks to, you know, the well-managed ranch of the Wild Wild West is how do you maintain control effectively? So
We will find out at 4 p.m. tomorrow.
yes, exactly.
Randy, sure. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for coming by.
thank
You
you.
are the VP of Delivery Support at Kion.
Yes, yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.
Don't